Thank you so much. As you can see, these characters mean so much to so many people, including myself. So everybody wanted to jump at the opportunity to speak with you, to ask you questions, to dote on you and your characters. But thank you so much for being so receptive to talk to us, because obviously we love you and your work.
Well, I got to tell you, like I've always said, uh, I'm at this stage of my career, at my age, I'm just happy that anybody will talk to me. So, thank you for doing this, and thank you for showing the love that you guys obviously feel for the character that
Yes.
I've created.
Of course.
I'll tell you one thing. If somebody had told me when I was in high school that there would come a time when every single week 30 beautiful women and occasionally men would be sending me pictures of themselves in a low-cut red dress, I would have written the book a whole lot sooner. So
And so before we get in, I know a lot about you or your work, and so I want to like tell our viewers and our listeners about you and how you all how you created Roger, and I want to get some tidbits from you. But before we get started and we discuss, let's just go around and not to talk too much about the film, but just tell Gary what the characters of Roger and Jessica and Eddie mean to you. And we can start with Darren because he's the first in my peripheral vision.
me, well,
Oh no, Darren. Oh no, Darren. We're talking to you. We're telling you.
they don't mean anything to me. I mean, I'd rather watch Sylvester Stallone, but hey, go ahead.
The characters of Roger and Jessica represent my childhood for me. I remember seeing this movie when it was in the theaters. I think I was in 5th grade. And what was so exciting to me was the opening montage where they all cut, and then you see that all of the characters, all the cartoon characters that we grew up with are like working actors in Toontown. That blew me away. So I was immediately hooked because I had wanted to be an actor since I could speak, basically. So anything that was like a behind the scenes Hollywood, anything was amazing to me. But what also was spectacular about it was the mix of live action and animation. And then I remember having the Nintendo game as a kid and going into town and having to solve questions and tell really funny jokes. And I just love Roger Rabbit. So when I found out that we were doing this interview, I said, oh my goodness, this now gives me the time to break out my Jessica Rabbit that I've been concocting in my head for years, but haven't had a reason to do.
Well, I'm glad you did. It's an honor, and you look sensational.
You do. I think red is your color, Darren. I think red is your color.
Not a lot of people can wear red, but my grandmother told me I can.
Yeah. Randy?
So I've been obsessed with this movie ever since I was very little. And I did tell James that I wanted to tell you this story because I've always had such a connection to Jessica Rabbit. So when I was little, I want to say like 3 or 4 years old, every day I would watch this movie on VHS every single day. My mom would put me in the living room, to play whatnot, watch the movie. She'd walk out of the room, go do what she needed to do. And the second Jessica's song came on, she'd walk into the living room and my clothes would be missing. I literally did a striptease every single time. And she's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm Jessica Rabbit. I used to tell people I was Jessica Rabbit and that my name was Jessica Rabbit. Full-blown obsession, even to this day. Like, I love it. Everything that you created is just wonderful. And it's such an honor to get to meet you. Like when I heard that.
But now you keep your clothes on,
right? Sometimes. No, I'm just kidding.
She does do Rocky Horror, so.
Yes. I did do it for less number to it, so.
Judge Doom and Roger.
Yes. This movie has been so prevalent in my life since I was a kid. I love Roger Rabbit. I love Jessica Rabbit. I love Eddie the detective. Everybody. Judge Doom, classic. Like, he's such a good villain. Like, he's a very well-written villain. And it's like the undertones of, like, getting rid of paradise, and putting up a parking lot. is
Oh.
I love that. I love that the parking lot guy is the jerk here. I love it.
It's capitalism.
Yeah.
I love this movie. When I was a kid, I saw it in the movies. I wanted to be Roger Rabbit. This was my Halloween costume when I was like, I don't know, 12. I don't know. But this movie meant a lot to me because I really like the idea of cartoon being brought into reality because like so cool. That really inspired me later on in writing and stuff, let me tell you. But one of the most influential things about this movie to me was Roger's attitude about what happened when you made people laugh and how the guy, you know, didn't turn him in, even though he could have got sweet cash because Roger made him laugh. And that kind of stayed with me my whole life, honestly.
I love that. John?
So, like a lot of people, I remember watching this as a little kid, and the evolution of it is so weird. Like when I'm a little kid, I'm watching it, and it's this mystery movie with live action and cartoons. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But as I grew older, I started to appreciate more of the thematic elements and like understand the characters a lot more. Like, by the way, I remember when I was a little kid, I think the first like behind the scenes thing I ever watched was for Roger Rabbit because I wanted to see how it was made, and it blew my mind when I found out Bob Hoskins was British because he's so good with that accent.
Mhm.
But like learning about the characters and seeing all these great little subtle moments with them, but then finding about the book and finding out where these things come from, and as I got older, I appreciated the craftsmanship and the storytelling, and then I started to appreciate film noir as a genre and noticing all the tropes that are being brought into this, but with cartoon characters like these silly, like just imagining, like obviously film noir tropes have been done with cartoon characters before, but getting like a serious kind of like almost getting a John Huston or Orson Welles movie with these characters was something phenomenal, and there's such great creativity there. And Eddie, Roger, and Jessica are such great characters. Like they fill a lot of the tropes that you would expect with these, but they're also such great distinct characters as well. So I appreciate it. Like obviously it brought a lot of joy to me as a child, but also as an adult, it's aged like wine. It just there's something new every time I watch it, whether it's a special effect, whether it's a storytelling element, or finding out something about the original series that it came from. It's always growing, and there's always something else to it.
And Eddie?
What are you talking about? This is just my Thursday afternoon attire. One of my first earliest memories of going to a movie was Roger Rabbit. And it was just one of those moments that like it sticks with you, like when you understand what the magic of movie making is. And just the very concepts of it, as a child, like I probably didn't get until much later in subsequent rewatches. But as a kid, like the fact that you had Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and Roger Rabbit all basically in the same movie, like this was like the Avengers before the Avengers. This was an incredible feat just of like also like just technical filmmaking, but also later as like I grew up and watched the movie again and again, just how tight the story is. And most importantly, like for you, I mean, I read the novel in college. I took a magical realism literature course, and this was one of the requirements of it. And the appreciation that I have for the prose version of Who Censored Roger Rabbit, to me, like that's even greater, simply because like I don't think anyone wrote anything like this until you did. The very concept of like a gumshoe novel, but with comic strip characters, and then turning it into cartoon characters when the movie came out, and then the subsequent sequels that you have. It just again ingenious, and a part of my childhood that like I can't thank you enough for. So yeah.
And I'll say that, Roger and Jessica and Who Framed Roger Rabbit was such a massive part of my childhood, and it meant so much to me that I missed them as I got older because we lived, the world's been quite crazy forever. So, but I missed them, and I discovered, about who censored Roger Rabbit, and then who plugged Roger Rabbit, and then who whacked Roger Rabbit. And there was a summer in 2019 where I read Who Plugged Roger Rabbit and Who Whacked Roger Rabbit back to back. And although they're different in terms of the air bubbles and uh, I guess the comic strip bubbles they speak with, it felt like I was visiting a friend that I hadn't seen in 20 years. And I really missed them. And those characters mean so much to people. And so we were talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit last year on our podcast, and it came up that you published the prequel, Jessica Rabbit Serious Business. And what I want to say to you is that I'm so glad that you've embraced the Disney version of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because there might be some authors that are like, my book was the predecessor and the precursor of this, and Disney, of course, Disney-fied it. But what I love about it is that you embrace what came before and what comes after. And I think it's so great because that you realize that the Disney film was the introduction to many of us to your books. And I really love how you've never given up on Roger and Jessica, and you've never given up on Eddie. It just feels so familiar. And it's just to have subsequent media with them when, Mouse Ears Corporation may have their own qualms about certain things. It's great that you've never forgotten them, and you keep doing books for us and media for us, because people miss those characters. There's something very cathartic about Roger Rabbit and Jessica and that Toontown world that we escape to. So thank you. I want to say thank you for continuing on their story.
Thank you guys for everything that you've just said. I mean, after what you've just said, I think I'm done for the day. I think we can turn off the cameras and go home. Really, nothing more I can add to that. A couple of things that you brought up. The fact that you saw it as a small child. My fan base, when I first started out, when the movie first came out, my fan base was anywhere from grade schoolers up through older people. And as the years went by, the grade schoolers grew up and had children of their own. And when the VHS version came out, they started using it as a babysitter. And so all of a sudden, my younger fans who had grown up, all of a sudden brought in a new crowd of younger fans. So, and I see that. I saw it again when the DVD came out, and I saw it again when the movie went on Disney Plus.
Mhm.
My fan base keeps getting younger and younger, but also staying older and older. So
Yeah.
the Roger fans keep growing. The other interesting thing that you brought up was the Disney version. And,
Yeah.
I was intimately involved with the movie. A lot of writers aren't, but I was. And the problem that I ran into when I did Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, which is the second novel in the series, probably a 500 million people had seen the movie. All right. And I think maybe 12 people had read the book. And of those 12, 5 of them were my mother and my aunts. So to most people, the image of Roger, Jessica, Eddie was the Disney image and not my image. So when I wrote Plugged, I had a bit of a thematic problem. I didn't want to Disneyfy the story. I did if you've read the book, and everybody should read the book because it's a work of towering genius. The Who Censored book is a dark, brooding, noirish mystery. And of course, the movie is not. So I like writing noirish kind of stuff. It's one of my great loves and one of my passions. So I was tossed up about just how noirish to make the sequel. Should I continue with the noir detective theme, or should I go more Disney bright light? And I kind of did it as a hybrid. So it's a little of both. And it works well enough. Book was very well reviewed. A lot of people have read it. Reviewers love it. When I wrote the third novel, Who Whacked Roger Rabbit, I decided to go back to the concept of the original. And Who Whacked is less Disneyfied, more wolfified. It's more noirish, more brooding, a little darker. And it's in thematic concept and terms, it's more like Who Censored Roger Rabbit than like Who Plucked Roger Rabbit. Still a good book, very well reviewed. A lot of people like it. During the pandemic, I decided that Jessica needed a book of her own because of all my characters, Jessica is probably the most popular. When I go to high schools, for instance, and I give a talk at a high school, the high school boys bow down in front of me and give me homage for having created Jessica Rabbit. Jessica Rabbit was named one of the most the sexiest women of the 80s, and I think it's kind of ironic because she's a cartoon character, for God's sake. I mean, you can make her look like anything you want, but she's become very real to a lot of people. When I went to China and gave talks to animators in China, there's a big animation industry in China. When I went and gave talks there, and I was talking about Jessica, and everybody knew who she was. The Chinese all knew Jessica Rabbit. And whenever I would mention Jessica Rabbit's name, everybody would kind of laugh. And so afterward, I asked my translator, I said, why is everybody laughing when I say Jessica Rabbit? He said, well, there's really no translation for Jessica Rabbit in Chinese. So in Chinese, we refer to her as Big Melons. So I was kind of the big melon man of China. But I decided that Jessica needed her own novel. She needed her own story. And this was a tough one for me to write. I mean, I'm a guy, right? And I'm writing about a woman who is viewed as one of the prototypical sexiest women of maybe all time. And I didn't want to denigrate her. I didn't want to overly sexualize her. I didn't want to fantasize her. I wanted to make her a real woman, but I wanted her to have the qualities that I think Jessica Rabbit has. She's bright. She's certainly smarter than any of the men around her. And of course, she's drop dead gorgeous, and all of those things. So when I wrote the novel, I had beta readers. I have beta readers who read my stuff to make sure I haven't gone off the rails. And I got, I think, 30 beta readers for Jessica Rabbit. And I made sure that they were the most feminist, militant women I could find. I mean, these were the real bra-burning, banner-waving feminist women.
Wow.
And
I always say if I had a bra, I'd burn it.
And so I gave them the Jessica Rabbit novel. And I said, I want to make sure that I haven't done anything here to make her less of a woman than I think she is. And the comments I got back were almost universal. Almost every woman came back and said, Jessica Rabbit in this book is exactly the kind of woman I've always wanted to be. If you've read the book, well, I'll give you a couple of hints here. The book has a lot of what my agent and my editor calls spit moments, but they don't say spit, right? We'll keep it for the family trait. As you're reading the book, you come to something and you realize that what you're reading throws a 180-degree spin into the story, and you come to it and you say, "Oh, spit! Where did that come from?" And there are a number of those throughout the book. I'll give you one spoiler. Jessica Rabbit starts the book as a poor shop girl working at a kind of a comedy joke toy store. And she's not particularly attractive, kind of ordinary, but very smart. And it takes her from there on the journey that she takes to become Jessica Rabbit. It shows how she met Roger. It shows where tunes come from. Shows where Toontown comes from and how Toontown came to be. And the one spoiler I'll give you is that through the entire book, Jessica is human. She's not a toon.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, I urge you to read it. If you're at all a Jessica Rabbit fan, I urge you to read it because you will be surprised. You will definitely be surprised. Right?
I'm excited because we were discussing it. I was like, oh my God, Jessica Rabbit has a prequel. And what I love is that you haven't given up on these characters. I know they still live inside you, but I thank you for not giving up on them on our behalf. Because I mean, we all have nostalgia for them. And with the way that Hollywood is now, there really is no original ideas, hardly any. And they're not doing anything real. And you're doing something that you're creating new stories for these characters versus just pumping out, prequels and sequels. These sequels and these prequels are actually, they continue the story forward, and it's nostalgic.
Yeah, and as I say in the Jessica Rabbit, the forward to Jessica Rabbit, in Toontown, time and events are kind of a nebulous concept. The movie was set in 1946. The original Who Censored Roger Rabbit was kind of set in a Never Neverland. It could have been any time. I saw it as noirish 30s, but it could have been modern times. Jessica Rabbit is purely modern. She's using cell phones and she's flying jets and purely modern. But if you think of the characters as actors, you can say, well, okay, they acted in a movie called Who Framed Roger Rabbit that was set in 1946. And, they were actors acting in a movie, and those were all sets, and it takes it to an entirely different level. I will continue to write about these characters for as long as I'm able to write about anything, because to me, these characters are real. It's the hardest writing that I have ever done and that I ever will do, because in order to write about it, I have to go into Toontown and look around and see what's there. And I'm not as much inventing it as I'm shutting my eyes and going there and describing what I see. And that's exhausting work. When I first wrote the book, I had a real job, as opposed to now where I have no job at all. But I had a real job, and I used to go to work at 8 o'clock every day. And so I would get up at 4 in the morning, and I would write from 4 until 7:30, and then go to work. And by the time I got to work, I was so exhausted that I had trouble doing my real job, because I was so tired from having spent 3.5 hours in Toontown. Really, and there was a time when we were making the movie, when I was in a room with 35 of the most creative people I've ever met in my life. And these people are all throwing out ideas on how to make my story and my characters better and funnier. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, if I had you people at my kitchen table back when I was writing this book, man, it would have gone a lot quicker and I would have gotten a Pulitzer Prize, you know? So I don't think you're ever going to have to worry that I'm going to forget you, because I'm not. These characters are a part of me. They're a part of my history. They're a part of my legacy. These characters will be around long after I'm gone. And, you know, on my tombstone, it will say, "Here lies Gary K. Wolfe. He created Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit, and Toontown." And that'll be enough. You know, that'll be enough.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I'm sure many people want to know, and you could give us the Cliff Notes version, but how did that small little niche book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, become? How did Disney get their idea to adapt that? How did that even happen?
Sure, easy. I wrote the book. Well, let me tell you first. I was writing short stories, and I was selling short stories. I had no trouble at all selling the short stories. All science fiction. And I began to realize that instead of writing 12 short stories and selling them to science fiction magazines, I could write one novel and maybe sell it to a publisher, you know, get more money and become rich and famous. So I wrote a novel, and my agent sent it to Doubleday, and Doubleday bought it on the spot. It was called Killer Bowl. It was a dystopian story about football played in actually the year 2010, 2011, written in 1976. And in that book, I predicted the gas crisis, cell phones, the internet, mixed martial arts, and MMF wrestling. And based on that, Doubleday said, "Hey, you know, we really like your stuff. Here, we'll give you a contract for 3 more books. You can write anything you want, you know, and we'll publish it. We really love your stuff." So I had basically a 4-book contract with Disney, with Doubleday. So the first book was Killer Bowl. The second one was A Generation Removed. The third one was A Resurrectionist. And I would write them and send them to Doubleday, and they'd publish them. So for the 4th novel, I wanted to write something that incorporated the things that I loved as a kid. And those things were comic books, cartoons, comic strips on the one hand, and noir mysteries on the other hand. And I get into comic books because I come from a very small farm town in Illinois, a town called Earlville. My dad ran the pool hall there. And my mother always told me, you know, if you don't want to stay in Earlville the rest of your life and wind up running your dad's pool hall, the one thing you can do to make that happen is to read. You know, read, and that'll get you out of this town. But, you know, good mother that she was, she never put any restrictions on what I could read. So I read comic books, you know. And then my dad, he read what they call true crime magazines. And true crime magazines were exactly as advertised. They were magazines that talked about true crimes, always murders. And there would be photographers who would go to murder scenes and oftentimes get there before the police, photograph the murder scene, and then sell it to the magazine, and they would do a story about it. That was pretty graphic stuff. You know, if you ever saw a movie with Tom Hanks called Road to Perdition, Jude Law played a photographer who did this. And that was based on a real guy named Weegan, who actually was the guy who used to do this. So, you know, luckily, I mean, my mom also didn't say, "Hey, don't read your dad's stuff," because that'll rot your brain. And luckily, I transitioned from true crime, horrible murder magazines to better quality of noir fiction, you know, Raymond Chandler, Mickey Spillane, you know, the better stuff. And I had a love for both. So I wanted to do a novel that combined the two, and, you know, not an easy concept. So I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning, you know, purely for research. I told my wife, I was just watching this for research, trying to get some ideas. And I was taken not with the cartoons, which were pretty simplistic, but and boring, basically, but with the commercials, because I saw cartoon characters like the Trix Rabbit, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, Captain Crunch, cartoon characters talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I said, geez, there's a great idea for a book. What if you had a world where cartoon characters are real? What kind of a world would that be? So I spent a year just doing research, figuring out what cartoon characters did that would be funny, hilarious, or just, bizarre in a human world. And, one of my favorites was of course, the word balloons. My cartoon characters spoke in word balloons, so that when you spoke to a cartoon character, you didn't actually speak to them. They would produce a word balloon and you would read them. And if they turned around, the word balloon would turn around. So you'd have to either go around behind them and the word balloon from the right side, or learn how to read in reverse. And now if somebody played a piano, the piano notes would go trailing off as notes, and people would collect these and roll them up and cut them into 8x10 sheets. And that's where sheet music came from. So, I had a lot of fun playing with that concept. And I came up with Roger Rabbit, who I based on a lot of things, mostly kind of a Disney version of Bugs Bunny, although I had no relationship with Disney at this time and never expected to. I saw Roger as kind of the Disney version of Bugs Bunny. Baby Herman was based on a lot of baby characters that were in comic books and comic strips back in the 30s and 40s. There was Baby Huey and Baby Hugo, and they were kind of big, overgrown babies. And I thought it would be fun to have Baby Herman be one of these. And I always thought the best line in the book was Baby Herman saying, "I've got a 50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky." And I think that's the best line in the book. Although, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way. It's getting a lot more play. But and then, I did Jessica, who was the girl I would have dated in high school if I had been able to get a date in high school. The boys outnumbered the girls in that school by 35-1. So, good luck getting a date if you're the president of the checkers club. So Jessica, I based on a number of my fantasy girls of my youth: Rita Hayworth, Veronica Lake, especially with her over the eye hairstyle, Betty Grable, Marilyn Monroe, and especially a Tex Avery character called Red Hot Riding Hood. If you look up the Red Hot Riding Hood cartoons, you can see them on YouTube. I think one of them's called Red Hot Riding Hood. One of them's called Wild and Wolfie. But you'll see that Red Hot is Jessica's grandmother. And there's a scene where she does a dance in a club that is basically the same kind of dance that Jessica does in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So, I named the Detective Eddie after my dad, because he was the one that got me down that road in the first place. Wrote the book and sent it to Doubleday as the 4th book in my 4-book contract. And for the first time in my writing career, hundreds of short stories and 3 novels, I got a reject. Doubleday rejected the book, and they said, well, "We're not going to print this book." And I called my editor and I said, "Sure, why did you reject this book? This is the best thing I've ever written." And she says, "Yeah, we all agree. It's hilarious. It's funny, but it's so unusual. It's like nothing you've ever written before. It's like nothing anybody has ever written before, that I couldn't publish it. I had to take it to the marketing department, and they were the ones who rejected it. So I called the head of the marketing department. I said, "Chuck, why did you reject my book?" And he said, "Well, we all loved it. We all thought it was really great, but there's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. It's not a regular mystery. It's not a fantasy. It's not a children's book. It's not, it's not really an adult book. There's no category for it on the bookstore shelves. I can't sell this book. I said, all right, look, what would you do if somebody gave you Alice in Wonderland or The Wizard of Oz or Gulliver's Travels? What would you do with those? He thought about it for a minute and says, I couldn't sell those either. So I went to my agent and I said, Bill, I said, if I can't sell this book, I don't want to be a writer anymore because this is my love. This is my passion. I don't want to do anything else. I want to do this. And he said, well, don't worry about it. We'll sell it. We'll sell it. It's a great book. We'll sell it. So he started sending it out to different publishers, different editors. And along the way, the book got 110 rejects. It was rejected 110 times. A lot of publishers rejected it once. A couple rejected it twice. A few rejected it 3 times. Always for the same reason. There's no category for this on the bookstore shelves. We can't sell this book. So at the time, they used to give you rejects by mail. They used to send you the reject by mail. I don't get many rejects, so I don't know how they do it today. Probably email, but in those days, they sent it by mail. And my wife used to call my trip out to the mailbox every night the daily disappointment, because I would go out and come back just full of rejects. And finally, the 111th submission, which is the number I play in the lottery now every month, the 111th submission, it went to St. Martin's Press and landed on the desk of an editor named Rebecca Martin. And Rebecca had just published a major bestseller for St. Martin's. And so the president of the publishing company gave her a vanity project. He said, whatever book you want to publish, you go ahead and publish. And just at that time, Roger Rabbit came across her desk because she read it and she loved it. All the editors always loved it. It was always the marketing department that rejected it. So she took the book to the president of the company and said, here's the book I want to publish. So he said, okay, I'm going to take it home. I'm going to read it tonight. I'll get back to you in the morning. So he went home, read it, came back in the morning, called Rebecca into his office, said, Rebecca, I told you you could publish any book you wanted. You can't publish this because I can't sell it. So we're not going to publish it. And Rebecca stood up to the plate and looked him in the eye and said, look, you said I could publish it. Either publish it or I quit. So they published the book, and albeit in very, very small quantities, like 5,000 copies, which is, next to nothing. I mean, it's very small. And, people have often asked me if you could get a time machine and go back in time and change something in your life, what would you change? And the thing that I would change and the thing that I would do is I would get in that time machine and I would go back to 1981 when that book came out, because that book, 5,000 copies, that book came out priced at $2.99. And I would go back to 1981 and I would buy them all. And I would put them in a barn somewhere and I would haul them out today, because if you can find a copy of that book on eBay, it's well north of $500. So, I would sell them all today and I'd be living in a castle in Spain. But basically, they brought the book out and they bought the book in 1980, and it took a year for the publishing process to catch up, and it didn't come out until 1981. So between 1980 and 1981, the book hadn't come out yet. I got a call and on my home phone, and the guy on the other end of the phone says, "Is this Gary K. Wolf?" I said, "Yes, it is." He says, "Hi, this is Roy Disney from the Disney Company." And I said, "Yeah, right, Roy Disney." The Disney Company calling me at home. That's rich. Who is this really? And he said, no, it's really Roy Disney. He said, I just read your book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in having Disney make a movie of it. And it's, yeah, right. The book hasn't even come out yet. Oh, are you kidding me? And it turned out that somebody at St. Martin's Press. I never found out who, and I tried desperately because I wanted to kiss her or him full on the lips. But somebody sent a copy of the manuscript to the Disney company and said, you know, I think you'd be interested in this book that we're about to publish. And they were. You know, this was 1980, and Disney in 1980 was in danger of becoming a second-rate movie house.
Mhm.
They were making movies like Flubber and the Nutty Professor and
Watcher in the Woods.
yeah, and the Black Hole and the Black Cauldron, which disappeared down the black hole. They were making movies that were the bottom half of double features, and all of a sudden there were no more double features. So they, you know, they were going out of they were going to go out of business if they didn't change their business plan. Also, they saw Roger Rabbit as being something that could propel them back into the forefront of the movie business. And also they make a tremendous amount of money selling products with their characters on them. I'm sure you've noticed that people walk around wearing Mickey Mouse t-shirts, and their characters, the characters table, they got a little stale. They couldn't have fun with Mickey anymore because he had become the corporate spokesmouse. And you know, he had to treat him seriously. You could have fun with Donald, but nobody could understand what he said. So, you know, he was kind of off the table. They saw Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman as characters that they could merchandise, make t-shirts, lunchboxes, whatever. And so they wanted that. They offered me more money for it than I'd made on everything I'd ever written, put together. And you know, of course I'm going to say yes, even though if you've read the book, I honestly didn't see any way that they could make that book into a movie and you know, retain the qualities of it that I had put into the book. I just didn't think it was a filmable book, but they were certainly willing to try, and I was willing to let them. So
Bada bing, bada boom.
yeah, for the first, this was 1980, for the first 5 years, they pretty much proved me right. They didn't have the creative talent. They didn't have, admittedly, they didn't have the technology to do the movie, to do it right. They came to me at one point, Roy Disney, and said, you know, we're not having any luck doing this as a live action animated movie. What would you say if we did it with the animated characters wearing costumes like they do at Disneyland? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Jesus, I'm going to get the Disney stable. I'm going to get Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant. I'm going to get Haley Mills as Jessica. I'm going to get Dean Jones as the Rabbit and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman.
That could have worked.
I would watch that.
Compromises the principle just a little bit. And they said, yeah. So they went off and tried. And I think they'd still be trying today if it weren't for a couple of things. In 85, Roy Disney was kind of forced up the ladder and out, and he was replaced by a guy named Michael Eisner.
Yeah.
Mike Eisner brought with him a guy named Jeffrey Katzenberg. Mike and Jeff had worked together at 20th Century, and they had done Jaws and a bunch of big blockbusters. And when they came in, they looked at what the Disney company was doing in terms of movies, and they canceled all the projects, everything, because that's what you do when you're a movie studio head and you come in and take over from a previous. They canceled all the projects, all except for Roger, which they both knew that they had to make if they were going to retain any semblance of credibility in the movie industry. So the two of them did something that nobody at Disney had ever done before. They brought in an outside producer to produce a movie for Disney. And the guy they selected was a guy, little known guy, you probably never heard of him, named Steven Spielberg. And so Steve Spielberg comes in, and his first action is to bring in Bob Zemeckis. And Bob Z had seen the project, had seen the book, he'd read the book. Both Steve Spielberg and Zemeckis had read the book when it first came out, and they both loved it and thought it would be a great movie. Zemeckis had been offered the directing job back in 1982 and had turned it down because he didn't really think that Disney had the clout to do it. And of course, he was right in 1982. So he went on to direct, Back to the Future and Forrest Gump and, a bunch of other stuff that you've never heard of either. So, now you've got Steve Spielberg, you've got Bob Zemeckis, and Jeffrey Katzenberg really promoting this movie within Disney, and things start to happen. And to show you the difference that Steven Spielberg makes in Hollywood, when Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers in 1982, I think, or 1981, he went to Warner Brothers and said, look, we're making a live action animated movie, and it's going to have our characters plus real live actors. It's going to be breakthrough stuff. We'd like to have Bugs Bunny come in and do a cameo. Just come on screen, say, what's up, Doc, walk off. How about that? And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and said, get lost. There's no way that Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Walt Disney movie. That is never going to happen. So in 1986, Steve Spielberg walks over to Warner Brothers and makes the identical request. Hey, we're doing this movie, live action animation. We'd like to have Bugs Bunny do a cameo. And Warner Brothers says to Steve Spielberg, of course, take him. What about Porky Pig? Because you want him too. And how about the Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote? And somebody, Sam, God, you got to have Tweety Bird and Sylvester. Take them all. Take them all. The only requirement was that Bugs Bunny, being a superstar, had a contract. And his contract stipulated that Bugs had to be in every scene with Mickey. You could not have Mickey alone. Bugs had to be with Mickey because they were co-equal superstars. So, and they had to have the same exact number of words of dialogue. So if you watch the movie, you'll see they're in every scene together. And if you count their dialogue, you'll see that they have the same number of words of dialogue. Now, something that I just found out that I wasn't aware of, but two things about Bugs. Warner Brothers wanted to use the modern Bugs, this was 86, so they wanted to use the 1986, 87 Bugs. Disney, the Disney animators, wanted to use the 1946 Bugs, and they're different. They have a totally different look to them. And so Warner Brothers was very insistent that they would only approve this if they used the 1986 Bugs. So the Disney animators did two versions of all the bug scenes. They did one with the 1986 Bugs, and they did one with the 1946 Bugs. They showed Warner Brothers the 1986 scenes, and they put the 1946 Bugs in the movie. And Warner Brothers wasn't aware of it until they actually saw the movie on the screen. And Warner Brothers went ballistic when they saw this. They were at the premiere and they saw this. They said, that's the 1946 Bugs. We didn't approve that. And there were threats of lawsuits and everything. But the movie was such a smash hit that all of a sudden Warner Brothers realized that, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. They started selling 1946 dolls all over again. So they ended up pretty being happy about it. But Warner Brothers was such a pain in the butt for the animators to deal with that they wanted to take a shot at Warner Brothers in the movie. And there's something in the movie, there's something in animation called gags in the margins. Animators discovered way back in the early days of animation, back in the days of Gertie the dinosaur and Alley-Oop and way back, that film goes through the camera at 24 frames a second. Animators discovered that you could screw around with 6 of those 24 frames and put in little visual gags, and the human eye couldn't see it. So there have been gags like this going all the way back to the start of animation, and there are still gags like this. And the Roger Rabbit movie is filled with them. But one of the gags in the margins that they wanted to put in was when Bugs and Mickey are parachuting down, and they're parachuting down with Eddie, and Eddie says, "Hey, give me a spare. You got a spare?" And they give him a tire, and whatever. In that scene, gag in the margin, 6 frames out of 24. Now that's 6/24 of a second, so invisible to the naked eye. As a gag in the margin, they wanted to have Mickey give Bugs the finger. Okay, so the animation department was being run by Dick Williams in England, and Dick had brought in kind of a Tower of Babel collection of animators. He got a lot of animators from former Iron Curtain countries. When the Iron Curtain opened up, a lot of animators left and came over and started working for him in England. He had people from all over the world, and they didn't have a common language. So if you wanted to speak to like the Uzbekistani animator, you had to go to the Spanish guy who would talk to the Greek guy who would talk to the Uzbekistani guy, and go back around. So the guy, I can't remember what the nationality of the guy was who was tasked with doing the Mickey finger thing, but whoever he was, it got lost in translation. And so when you watch that scene now, if you freeze frame it and watch it frame by frame, you will see that instead of Mickey giving Bugs the finger, it is Bugs who is giving Mickey the finger, which is entirely the wrong message, right? Entirely the wrong message. So anyway, I digress. So that was, that was how the movie wound up at Disney. I was kept involved all the way because Steve and Bob C both recognized that I was the creative guy who thought of this in the first place, and they kept me involved. I was on the set whenever they were filming, if I wanted to be. I'm a writer. I'm not a movie guy. And movie making to me is deadly dull as watching paint dry. It's just horrendously boring for me. But they let me be there as much or as little as I wanted, and we filmed a lot in England at Elstree Studios in England because Steve Spielberg likes the food in England. Go figure. No, that's not really true. Just like the food. That's not why we filmed it. We filmed there because they had a 3-story sound stage at Elstree, which they didn't have in the United States. They do now, but they didn't then. And the sets were on the 3rd floor. The puppeteers who were manipulating the real objects were on the 2nd floor, manipulating the objects through holes on the floor. And then Bob Z was down on the 1st floor with a bank of video monitors seeing what was being filmed. And he had animators down there who were drawing over the video monitors so he could see the relationship between the animation and the live action. And so I went to see that, and they treated me well. I mean, as a writer, writers usually, if a movie company flies a writer anywhere, they usually fly them down in the hold with the baggage. But I got first class treatment, first class airfare, first class hotel. I stayed at a Ritz or someplace. They gave me a car and a driver, and I said, what do you do for me? And he said, well, I drive you wherever you want to go. I said, if I want to get a pizza at 3 a.m, yes, absolutely. You don't even have to go. I'll go get it for you and bring it back. And I said, okay, can you take me to the carriage entrance at Harrods? And so he says, of course. So we drove up to the carriage entrance at Harrods, the big department store. And me and my wife got out, and I thought, if only all the people from Earlville could be here and see me getting out of this this chauffeur-driven limousine at the carriage entrance of Harris. So, you know, the movie opened. Nobody really knew if this was going to be an adult movie or a child's movie. Movie opened to glowing reviews. Was the highest grossing movie of the year, made almost $200 million that year in 1988. Next year, it was nominated for several Academy Awards, won 5. I got to go to the ceremony, got to go up on stage, run around like an idiot, and, you know, win my Academy Award. I sat near enough to Cher to smell her perfume. And I mean, it was quite an adventure for me. And you know, I think the highlight maybe of my life was when we did the premiere of the movie. They did the premiere of the movie at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, so that I wouldn't have to go to LA, so that I could just come up. I live in Boston, so I could just you know, go down from Boston. So I'm in the VIP section of the Radio City Music Hall, and I'm getting ready to see my movie for the first time all the way through. And I had seen all of it. I'd seen it being filmed. I'd seen bits and pieces, but they were still working on it up to like 2 weeks before it was released. And so I'd never seen it all the way through. I'd never seen my credit. So I see my credit on screen for the first time. And on my left, I had Kathleen Turner, who was the voice of Jessica Rabbit. On my right, I had Amy Irving, who was Steve Spielberg's wife at the time, who was the singing voice of Jessica Rabbit, because for whatever reason, Kathleen was pregnant at the time, and whether she just didn't have birth control or whether she just can't sing, I don't know. But she couldn't sing the song. So Steve, who was there with Amy in the recording studio, said, "Hey, Amy, you sang in Yentl, why don't you give it a whack?" And I said, Steve, you know, nobody's going to believe that Jessica has one voice when she sings and another voice when she talks. He says, nobody will even notice. And nobody ever did. And Kathleen, because nobody knew if this movie was going to be any good or it was going to be another Howard the Duck, Kathleen decided to do it without taking screen credit, which is what James Earl Jones did in Star Wars when he did Darth Vader. That way, if Star Wars had flopped, it could just fade into the woodwork. But if it was a massive success, he'd come out and say, "I was the voice of Darth Vader." So she decided to do that. So she has no screen credit on Roger Rabbit.
Oh, wow.
But Amy, who did the singing, took screen credit. So in the end, you will see Amy Irving singing voice of Jessica Rabbit. So I'm sitting here between two of the most gorgeous women I've ever seen in my life, and I'm about to see my movie for the first time all the way through, and my screen credit, you know, for the first time ever. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, life just doesn't get any better than this. And then, by golly, life got better because Kathleen reached over and grabbed my leg, and she whispered in my ear, she says, "Gary, are you excited?" And I said, "Kathleen, you have no idea. You have no idea." So, you know, the movie with the
But it's more like in her voice, "Gary, are you excited?"
So, you know, the movie was a huge success. It is currently, I still get the accounting, and it is currently, at last accounting, has grossed $1 billion worldwide.
Wow.
They've opened two themed Toontown lands, one in California, one in Tokyo Disneyland. Of course, there's been all the Roger Rabbit dolls and merchandise, and you know, whatever. We got some Roger Rabbit shorts. It's done well, and the thing that's most gratifying to me is that the characters have developed their own legacy. The characters are beloved and are going to far outlive me. So that's basically the long answer to your question.
And I will say, and then I'll have my co-host ask some questions. I will say what I love is that, you know, current modern Disney is very different than the Disney we all grew up with. So I'm glad that you have said, I'll continue the legacy. I'll create new stories. And I'm glad that you still have the passion and enthusiasm and reverence for the fans and reverence for the characters to continue their stories. Because the way that you write, I mean, I love some of your quotes in the books. The way that you write and the way that the characters act in the book are just hilarious. I'm just so thrilled that you still have the enthusiasm for Roger and Jessica and Eddie and all these other gaggle of characters, and that you continue on, because if it wasn't for you continuing on with your passion, we may never see Jessica and Roger again. We may never see new media, especially with current Disney culture. We may never see them again.
Well, to that, I will give you my stock answer. Stay tuned, because you never know. You never know. All right.
We don't want to get.
I hate to be mysterious, but I have to be a little mysterious. But stay tuned. All right.
Oh, well, we're thrilled and we're very, very happy. But in the meantime, we'll continue to read the books, and I will read Jessica Rabbit's Serious Business. But I have a own question of my own, but I want my co-host to go before me. So if you have any questions or comments for Gary, y'all can go ahead, and then I'll end on a question that I have.
I got one. So obviously you've drawn a lot of influence on noir, like films and pulp novels in particular. Was there anything specific that you drew upon when coming up with the story or thinking of the characters? Like, were you thinking of Bogart when you're thinking of Eddie Valiant, or were you thinking of maybe something like Kiss Me Deadly or Touch of Evil or something like that when you wrote the story?
Simple answer to that is yes to all of the above. I've watched all the Bogart movies. I've watched all the noir movies, Touch of Evil. I grew up on noir movies and loved them. And I've watched them all. I've read all of the hard-boiled noirish mystery novels. And not specifically stealing things from one or the other, but they're all in there. That's my milieu, and that's the background that I had to draw upon, and that's what I used. Yeah.
Well, how about you, rest of you guys?
I got sort of like two quick ones.
Where's your Eddie Valiant thing? I only answer questions if you're dressed as Eddie Valiant. Turn on your air conditioner.
In my office, and I had to turn the air conditioner on because I was roasting. All right. I don't know how people in
All right, we're gonna cut you a break here.
I'll wear the hat.
All right. That's more of a park ranger Jessica Rabbit hat, but I know.
Yeah, it's supposed like to do it in like 2 minutes. Yeah, so I have a question in regards to like the development of it. As far as I was aware from my research, there's like 40 different versions of the script before they finalized on.
Not that many, but yeah, the script that actually wound up being filmed, the Siemens and Price script, was one of the first ones we ever did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then, like I say, Disney really didn't have the horsepower to do this, and they brought in a lot of different producers, always Disney people, and they always said, "Hey, we need a different script." There are many, and there are not that many. There are probably 3 or 4, and you can go on eBay and you can buy them. I mean, they're available. You can see what they were doing. But when Bob Zemeckis, Bobsy, and Steve came on, they took a look at everything that had been done and said, this first one, Siemens and Price did, this is pretty good. So they called Siemens and Price, and they wrote that screenplay in 1981, and this is now 1985. And out of the blue, they get a call from Steve Spielberg saying, "Hey, we like your script and we're going to do a movie." I mean, these are 2 of the happiest guys in the world. So that was it. And admittedly, the problem that Disney was facing in the early days of development was not just creative, although that was part of it, but it was also technological.
Yeah.
There were technological developments that happened in 80, 85, 86 that we used in the movie. There were things that we developed for the movie that were actually used in the movie and that were used in other movies that came out before our movie came out, because it took so long to do this movie. The technology of it, Industrial Light and Magic. They took the movie and added the shading and the shadows to the two-dimensional cartoon characters, and that was something that Disney tried to do between 80 and 85 and had no luck. They just couldn't get it right. There's a very, very interesting scene when Roger is in the storeroom at the terminal bar, and he's with Eddie and Dolores, and I think it's Roger bumps the lamp, and the lamp starts swinging back and forth, and the shadows move back and forth, of course, as the lamp is moving, and the shadows move back and forth across Roger and back and forth. That is such a stupendous job of animation that animators who now do something that is really incredibly hard and incredibly successful refer to that as bumping the lamp.
Wow.
So, it wasn't all Disney's fault. It was partially Disney's fault, but not all Disney's fault. Once the creative talent came on board, once the technology got there, development was a lot easier. It was not easier, but it was, let's say, it was more possible.
Yeah. And then my second very brief question. Was there anything from the novel that you wish that made it into the final film? Like one thing that comes to mind, which I thought was brilliant in the novel, was the concept of doppel, where basically they could create their own like self. It's like almost like a stunt man. And that kind of like, not to spoil the novel, but like that's what.
And people ask me, were you disappointed that they didn't use your story? Well, the book story was the book story, and the movie story was the movie story. The book's a book, the movie's a movie, and they're both pretty good. Disney loved the word balloons. They loved the concept of the character speaking in word balloons. An early tests of the concept, they had the character speaking in word balloons, but even I had to admit that it just didn't work, because character would put up a word balloon and you have to stop, read the word balloon, and then go on. It was like a silent movie. So that didn't make it. They wanted to put in an homage to my word balloons.
Oh,
so there was a scene of Marvin Acme's funeral, and all the tunes have come to Marvin Acme's funeral. The pallbearers are Goofy, Coco the Clown, I don't know, a bunch of other characters, and they're carrying Marvin Acme's casket on their shoulders, and Goofy starts laughing, and then the other pallbearers start laughing, and pretty soon everybody starts laughing, because that's what tunes do. And they go by Felix the Cat. And Felix the Cat was a cartoon character, and I think he was also in the comic strips, the 30s and 40s, and he never spoke. He was a silent character. So as they went by Felix the Cat, they put up a word balloon from Felix the Cat that said sob. And the word balloon all of a sudden turned to tears and fell down on Felix the Cat and got his shoulders all wet, and then the casket went on. But for a lot of reasons, story reasons, timing reasons, they cut that scene.
yeah.
So there went my homage. And I'm always kind of sorry that, I didn't get my word balloon.
My favorite Ghoul Fiends, Darren and Randy, are two Dolly and Jessicas. Do you
I
have any questions?
have been doing some research and I'm always inspired by people who see things in a different way. And so the whole concept of cartoons talking with humans and all of that really fascinated me about you. And I was wondering if you could share with us the story about when you were in elementary school and you were told to color in between the lines.
Okay, I can do that. I'm glad you asked. That's my signature story. All right, so I was in grade school. It was like second or third grade, I can't remember. And we got an assignment, and our assignment was to take this picture that our teacher gave us and take it home and color it and to stay inside the lines. That was the only requirement. You had to stay inside the lines. So I took it home that night, and I mean, there was nobody better at staying inside the lines than I was. So I started coloring, and it was a typical farm scene. It was a farmhouse. There was a barn. There was a fence. There was a meadow, and there was a single cow out in the middle of the meadow. So I colored the farmhouse yellow because that's the color farmhouses were around Earlville. I colored the barn red. I colored the fence brown. I colored the grass green. All inside the lines. And I come to the cow, and it is a sad, lonely cow all by itself out in the middle of the field. And my mother had always told me that when people were all alone, that they got sad, they got lonely, and they were blue. And I said, well, it works for people, must work for cows. So I colored that cow blue. So the next day I hand in my paper. Day after that, teacher gives them all back except mine. She says, Gary, she says, come up to the front of the room. She says, and she says, turn around and face the class. And I thought, oh my God, I stayed inside the lines better than anybody. So she put that paper up over my head. And she said, class, she said, look at this stupid, stupid picture. She said, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white, cows are sometimes brown, black, and white, all three. She says, there is no such thing as a blue cow. She says, Gary, never, ever do anything that stupid again. She called my mother, and my mother had to go to school. And I mean, it was a big deal for my mother, getting a call from the teacher. And the teacher said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. He might need psychological help. And so that night, my mother and father called me into the living room, and they said to me, Gary, why did you color this cow blue? And I said, Ma, it wasn't me. It was you, really. I mean, you were the one who told me people sad lonely, color cow, blue. I was a cow sad lonely. I color the cow blue. And they said, well, you go outside and play for a while. Your dad and I are gonna have to talk about this. Now, you have to realize my mother and father were children of the Depression. My dad had to drop out of school in the third grade to go to work. My mom had to drop out of school in the eighth grade to go to work. So my dad now owned the pool hall. My mother worked in the school cafeteria. These were not what you call well-educated urban liberals. I mean, these were hardscrabble working people. And I honestly, even at that age, I didn't think this was going to have a happy ending. But my mother and my father called me back in the living room, and my mom sat me down. She said, your dad and I talked about this. And we decided the next time you want to color a cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. And so she called the teacher. She said, next time he does anything like that, let him. We don't care. He's being creative. And that was the first validation I ever had of my creativity. A week later, the teacher asked us all to write what we did on our summer vacation. And so all the kids were talking about how they went up to Wisconsin Dells or went to Chicago, the Museum of Science and Industry, or whatever they did on their vacation. And I wrote about how I went out into my backyard and I used tin foil and string and glue, and I built a rocket ship and I flew to the moon. And the teacher just handed it back on my desk and said, well, that must have been quite the trip. So that's my blue cow story. And yeah, I've called it a lot of cows blue since then. And
That's very sweet. And thank
I
you
love
so much for
that.
bringing that up, Darren. I mean, that was such a sweet, I mean, that was such a sweet story. I wouldn't expect any less of Jessica to bring that up. My favorite girlfriends are Randy.
I'll go. It's not so much as a question, is it's praise. It's been such a huge honor getting to talk to you tonight. Seriously, like you've created some of my favorite characters of all time. And even to this day, I still love them. I still watch the movie all the time. And Jessica will always own quite a piece of my heart, always and forever. Love
well,
Jessica Rabbit.
thank you for that.
And
I
yeah.
means a lot to me.
It means a lot to me actually getting to meet you. So thank you so much for taking time out to talk to us today.
And my favorite ghoul fiends, Roger and Judge Doom.
I guess my question would be, is there ever going to be any more Judge Doom media from you? Because that's such a unique style of like character. Like I want to know, why was he a bad guy? Like what made him a bad tune in the first place, outside of having a squeaky voice? Like what did he look like? Was he like grotesque? Was he just
There,
too silly and didn't want to be silly?
yeah, there are all kinds of theories about that. That he was originally a different kind of character. I don't think, because he was so definitely eradicated in the movie, I seriously doubt you're going to see any more Judge Dooms. I hate to disappoint you, but that's just not going to happen. However, if you're also a Red Shoe fan, and I know there are a ton, Red Shoe, the Red Shoe who was dipped, which I think is one of the most traumatic parts
Yeah.
of the movie.
Yeah,
The
that
Red
broke
Shoe who
me as
was
a child.
dipped has a fan club. Bring back the Red Shoe, and I get
Wow.
emails, letters from Bring Back the Red Shoe, and I have solemnly promised that the sequel, if and when there is a sequel, I say stay tuned, that in the sequel I will bring back the Red Shoe. So I'm
Yay.
not going to bring back Judge Doom because he's an evil SOB, but the Red Shoe deserves to come back.
Yes.
That's all the therapy we need.
Roger, do you have any questions, Roger?
Mine was really had to do with the word bubbles and whether or not they chose to do that. But you already answered that question. Other than that, the movie had a huge impact on me as a kid. It stayed with me my whole life. I had the yellow Who Framed Roger Rabbit lunchbox, like the plastic one, the thermos. I had the talking doll. Like I was into it.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll all right. One last question, and then I'll tell you 2 wrap-up stories. Okay. Give me one last question, and then 2 stories from me.
Oh, a question.
Oh, not from you. Doesn't have to be from you.
I was just gonna say, I have a question, but I just want to say, we can reiterate so much and tell you that these characters mean so much to people. We're really nostalgic to these characters, but also, we're in a weird place in the world right now, and it's great to have characters that you can lean on and depend on. And especially, it's great that you continue with the subsequent media so that we don't miss Roger and Jessica, that we can go back and to have them, and it means so much. And I never thought I would say this or ask you, but do you have a favorite quote from the film?
Well, I think I've answered that already. I mean, I've got a 50-year-old list and a 3-year-old dinky. By far, I think that was the best line I've ever written in my life. I think it's a little too, shall we say, pizzazzy for general use. And, the quote that everybody comes up with is, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way." And, equally as good, but I like the other better. So I'll close with 2 stories, if I may.
Yeah.
When we premiered the movie at Radio City Music Hall, they told me that there was going to be merchandise at Macy's, which is just down the street from Radio City Music Hall. And my wife and I were staying in a hotel right across the street, and I looked out actually in the middle of the night, I looked out because I could see Radio City Music Hall. I looked out in the middle of the night and I saw a line of people around the block to get in this movie, and it was midnight. And they were doing midnight showings, and that was when I knew that this was going to be something special. So I decided I got to go over and see the merchandise, because in those days there wasn't merchandise like there is today related to movies. There just wasn't. So I went over to Macy's. My wife and I went over to Macy's, and I asked the young lady at the front desk, the information desk. I said, "Do you have Roger Rabbit merchandise?" She says, "Yes, we do." I said, "Where is it?" She said, "Second floor." I said, "Oh, we're on the second floor." She says, "No, second floor." So we went up, and the entire second floor was Roger Rabbit merchandise, the whole second floor of Macy's. And so I decided I would buy the first piece of Roger Rabbit merchandise that I saw. That would be my lucky piece of Roger Rabbit merchandise. And that was this. Okay. Roger Rabbit doll. So I have my purchase, and I'm walking through the merchandise, and who should I see but Charlie Fleischer? And Charlie Fleischer was the voice of Roger Rabbit. Now, so I held up this doll, and I said, "Charlie," I said, "this is a talking doll. Is this your voice?" And he said, "Yes, it is. And here, I'm going to do this. All right." I don't know what that says, but whatever it was, that's Charlie's voice. And so Charlie autographed this doll for me. First, he drew a picture of Roger. There, you see, picture of Roger. And this is Charlie. It has Charlie's autograph. And this is the first piece of merchandise that Charlie autographed after the movie came out and after he was officially Roger Rabbit. And it's one thing I'll never part with.
That's all I had.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I'm going to close with one last story. When Steve was making the movie, he wanted to make sure that everybody who was involved in the movie in a major way had his or her favorite cartoon character in the movie. Bob Hoskins was Heckle and Jekyll. Bob Zemeckis was Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote. Dick Williams, the lead animator, was Droopy. So Steve came to me and said, "Gary, what's your favorite character? I want to make sure I've got your favorite character in the movie." I said, "Steve, I think I'm covered. I got Jessica, I got Roger, I got Baby Herman. I think I'm covered." He says, "I want to do something for you anyway." He says, "Well, we'll do something." So if you watch the movie, when Eddie Valiant is in the car driving through the tunnel going into Toontown, and it's dark and foreboding, and all of a sudden the curtain lifts and there's birds and singing, and little sunshine and happiness. If you look to the right, now this is a gag in the margin, 6 frames out of 24, so you got to be quick. If you look to the right, when he's coming into Toontown, you're going to see a yellow farmhouse, a red barn, a brown fence, a green meadow, and a blue cow standing all alone out in the middle of the field.
Oh, I swear I've seen that
I
before
love
while watching
that.
that. Oh my God.
So that's my story. And I gotta tell you, guys, this is one of the best podcasts I have ever done in my life. And I don't think that anybody is ever going to top this one. Thank you for inviting me, and it was such a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It meant so much to us. And I just want to tell you my favorite Roger Rabbit quote, which is, "Come on, Roger, let's go home. I'll bake you a carrot cake."
Well,
And he's
that
like,
one too. Yeah, that one too.
"Thank you so much." And again, you mean so much to so many people, and your characters mean so much to us.
All right. Thanks, guys. This was a real pleasure. And
Thank
It was
you
a real
so
pleasure to
much.
meet you, sir.
let me put in a plug for my website. All right.
Yes.
Commerce here. www.garywolf.com. You can read all about me there. You can buy my books. I occasionally post things in my blog posts, not so much, but go there and buy my books, buy in bulk. They make wonderful Christmas, Hanukkah, anniversary, birthday, whatever presents, okay?
And we need to stay tuned, right, for something else, Roger,
And,
down the line.
and stay tuned, okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care,
Thank
guys.
you.
See you.
Bye-bye.